In this particular video, we're going to look at alert dialogues. So for right now, we've got a blank project without a whole lot going on. I've gone ahead and created a basic layout, and instead of putting a text view in there, I've gone ahead and created a button. This button is called Alert Dialog. You can, of course, drag and drop that button right here into the center of your area. I have added a button_alert dialog as my ID, and I've given it basic text for alert dialog. So going back over to our main activity, when we invoke our button, that is when we press it on click it, we should then have a alert dialog pop up. An alert dialog is one of two different kinds of dialogues you can have within your Android Studio project or program for that matter. There used to be another one, a progress dialog. However, that's been deprecated because it basically takes away functionality from the user. So don't use it. We need to, of course, grab our button object and use it. So right now I am extending the activity class, and I am using Oreo at the moment, and I've gone into my Gradle file and I've gone ahead and moved us up to minimum SDK version of 26. So let's go ahead and work with this as we see it. So let's go ahead and do button alert is going to be equal to find view by ID, and we need to grab that ID, so we'll do r.id and button alert dialog. Now we need to, of course, cast this over to a button object. And there we are. Everything's fine. You may end up with an error right here. So actually, let's go to the SDK versions right over here. And we can see API level 2, revision 2 installed. I'm working with that. That's all great. My Gradle's up there to minimum 26. That's 26. My compiled SDK is 25 though. So let's turn that to 26 really quick and see what happens. So I'm going to go here. I'm then going to go to build clean project and let that happen. So let's wait for these what are these barbershop pole areas to finish up, and once they finish, we're good to go. I'm going to go ahead now and do a build. Once I get the chance to, it's still working on its building process. This is something that students have begun talking to me about. The button casting find view by ID is redundant. So within the latest version of Android, no longer do we need to cast these objects as buttons. Now, this is only if you're directly inheriting from the activity class and you're making sure your activity deals with version 26 and above. If you're not dealing with that, and instead we're going to work with the app compat activity class, which is what Google, Android, so forth, recommend that we actually continue to work with, you're going to see that that error goes away. I'm going to make this actually back to 17. I'm going to compile that at 17 actually as well, just to make sure we're reverse compatible. Now we need to deal with actually creating an alert dialog, and that's going to be through the button itself. So now that we have the button, we're going to do an on click. So let's do button alert dot set on click listener. There we go. And we're going to do a new on click listener. We're going to use an anonymous class in this particular case. So there's the new one right there. Here's the method that we need to override. And this is where things get a tiny bit messy. So be careful here, because if you're not careful with the parentheses and the curly brackets and so forth, you're going to get some errors and things aren't going to look right. So the first thing we need to do here within the on-click listener is actually create the builder object for our alert dialog. We always start with a builder. So let's do an alert dialog.builder. There you can see right at the top, and let's just call this builder is going to be equal to a new alert dialog.builder. And what this requires is a context. At the moment, we're working with the activity. If you look at the Android documentation on how you're supposed to use this, the reality is you should be working with this inside of a fragment, because within a fragment you can actually, if you change the device context, that is, if you rotate the device or do something different to it, your alert dialog won't disappear. The way we're doing it now, the alert dialog will actually disappear and go away. For now, though, we're just going to use the activities context. So let's go ahead and do main activity.this as the context. So we have our builder object. We now need to populate the builder object with different options. So let's go ahead and go to builder dot, and we can see all the different options here. We can set up buttons, we can set up our own view object, we can set up items. It depends upon how we want to use this particular view. And there are several ways we can do this. We can either use the default methods where we can populate either a positive, negative, or even neutral button. We can, of course, provide our own view. We can give it a list of items if we want to. Now, there are some recommendations on how this alert should work. And here, if we take a look at my slide from my class, this is taken straight out of the Android documentation. We have the title, which is at the top. This is optional. And of course, below that, we have our different action buttons. We can have up to 3 of these different buttons: positive, negative, and neutral. So going back into here, if we hit builder dot, so we can do set title, and our title can either be a string resource, so an r.string. Whatever we particularly want to create, or we could create our own XML file and work within that. I'm going to create a new string here, so let's do string, and let's call it name is going to be equal to dialog underscore title, and the title is going to be my test title. Save. There we are. Coming back over to our main activity, now all we need to do is do an r.string dot, and we'll do dialog title. The next thing we need to do is begin to set up the different buttons that we want, or if we want to, the context area, which is going to provide more information about what it is exactly that we're doing. So let's do builder.set, and we'll go down to message, and we're going to go with, this time let's go with a character sequence, since we already did an ID that was stored away within our XML file. And this message is going to say something along the lines of, hello there, comma, I am a complex message that you should listen to. Please ignore my bad typing. Anyway, we're going to put a semicolon on the end of that. Now, I'm doing these all in separate lines. The reality is I could have hit dot, and this dot will then allow me to, of course, continue on with additional functionality. So watch, set message there. So let's go back, and here we can see this set title dot set message, and we can continue on with that notation with each setting that we add. So we've done the set message. Let's go ahead now and do a dot set, and it's going to be for our positive button. So we have 2 different methods we can use. It can be either a character sequence, or it can of course be a resource ID that we have. I'm going to continue with the characters just because that's faster for us. So let's just say, sure, okay, because that's a button. It's not just one element we add. We also need to add a method that handles what happens when the user decides to click on it. So let's do a comma, and let's do a new on click listener. And if you look at the entire, basically the android.context.dialog interface, we're going to notice that we don't use the standard click listener. We use one specifically meant for the dialog interface. So let's go ahead and hit enter. We can see it provides us with our overrides, our on click method. Everything's great. It all works out. And then now if we go ahead and drill down, we can see that we're back to our parenthesis right there. So let's go ahead and hit dot again. And now we can set up our negative button. I'm not going to do the neutral button in this example. You can add it. It's the same as doing the positive and the negative, so it shouldn't be an issue for anyone out there. And let's do heck no, exclamation point, and we're going to create a new dialog on click listener. There we go, and we can see everything that we have, and we need to populate this with something, of course. Once again, this is an inner class. Because it's an inner class, we can access anything going on with our outer class. A good thing for us to do is to create methods in our outer class that our inner class can call upon that will handle each of these events. So going outside of this, doing a double check really quick. So there's our on create beginning and ending. So after that are going to be where we can declare new methods. What we can do is a protected, I'm making it protected so that no one else can see this, void on positive button. There we are. and we'll put some parentheses in there, and we'll do the same thing for the negated value. So protected void on negative button. All right, and you do the same thing for the neutral if you're actually using that. So this doesn't take any parameters because, well, it doesn't need any really in my particular case. So here's the positive button. I'm gonna go ahead and call that right here. And here's the negative button. I'm gonna call that right here when the negative happens. There we are. And that works out perfectly. So within this area, now we can code anything we want to. So what is it that we want to change? Well, why don't we go ahead back to our layout here, and let's add a text view, because that's the easiest thing to see some output, and put it, I don't know, somewhere within here. We have a constrained layout, so why don't we start using these constraints? So let's put you somewhere over there and you over there. Come on, work with me, please. People are watching. There we go. We'll do the same thing over here, and we'll do the same thing over yonder. There we go. We are almost centered up, except for the fact that we got that 16 bits over there. Now we're going to put this dialog right below, I don't know, put that. That's perfect. Now the set view is fine. We're going to make sure that this is above that. I'm going to move it up a certain amount. There we are. So now we have our text view object, and that text view object is going to change when we click the alert dialog, and it's going to be basically representing whatever one we press. So if it's positive, it'll say positive. If it's negative, it'll say negative. And if it's neutral, which you can implement on your own, it can say neutral. So going back over here, so on positive, we need to, of course, with an on create, grab a reference to that particular object. So let's go ahead and do button and call this text view. Let's call this not button, text view, enter, semicolon. Great, it's going to say something about us not having it. I'll enter to add that to our imports. Go back down to text view. Within here, right under button, we'll do text view is equal to a text view object. And then we'll do find view by ID, r.id.text view, and we're good to go there. We take our text view object now, and we come down to each of these, and we paste them in. And text view is going to have a parameter called set text, and that is going to end up being for us just positive and negative for each button. And of course, neutral if you decided to add a neutral button to your layout. So here we are, that gets called there, we're all good along there. We've integrated into this particular alert dialog a builder, a set title, a message, and a positive button. Now all we need to do is actually create this object. So to create it, what we're going to do now is hit dot and create. Once you have this object, you need to call show. Now what we can do is if we want to reuse this multiple times, we could create our alert dialog up here, and then of course call it, I don't know, let's just do alert dialog, and set our alert dialog here equal to it. Instead of creating our instance within this, now this is of course global, we can use it in other locations. So there's alert dialog, and all of this stuff happens, and set message is giving me a problem. Let's see what happens if I delete some stuff. Dot set message. We can save that out. Instead of doing it here, we can create a class-wide instance of it that we utilize. So here now we have builder equal to this, then we set up our builder object there, we create our builder object, and then whenever we want to show it on the screen, we can now call builder.show. All right, let's go ahead and save that. I'm gonna go hit run, and we're going to create, let's see, it looks like I have a Pixel version 25, minimum SDK though is 26, which is greater than a 25. Let's go into our Gradle documentation. I have a 17 here, a 17 there. My target though is 26. I'm gonna lower that to 25 so it works with our current emulator. Cancel. I'm gonna go ahead and build and clean the project, and once it's been cleaned, let's see, failed to install Android 17. So let's go to, let's see, minimum SDK version compile. Let's actually compile at 25. I'm sorry, that's not correct. Let's go ahead now and hit build, clean project. Go ahead and let it clean everything out. And since our compile edition is proper, everything should be fine. We'll now go to run. we'll pick the Pixel API 25, which is what I'm currently using. Now, of course, we have our beautiful screen. I'm going to click Alert Dialog. We get my title bar, my test title. We get, of course, the message, and then, of course, the buttons. So there's heck no. Let's go ahead and move that off screen. Now, that's simple. That's how you add a alert dialog with the basic functionality. In the next video that we see, we're going to talk about actually implementing our own layouts with an alert dialog so that you can create pretty much whatever you want to, whether it's password fields, input fields, or anything else. Once again, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Quick and fast, but I hope you learned something. I will see you next time. So long, goodbye.